You are exhausted, not just tired from a long day, deeply, fundamentally, bone-level exhausted, the kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix, the kind that follows you into weekends, into holidays, into the moments that are supposed to feel good but somehow don't quite land. And you have probably spent years assuming that is just what adult life feels like, that everybody feels this way, that this is simply the price of being alive in the modern world. But what if it isn't? What if the exhaustion you feel is not a personal failing, not a mental health crisis, not something a better morning routine could fix, but something far older and far more structural than any of that? What if your body and your mind are sending you a very clear signal, and that signal is this: you were not built for the life you are living? This is the story of what human life actually looked like for the overwhelming majority of our existence. And it is going to make you question everything you have been told about work, about productivity, about what a well-lived life is supposed to feel like. Let's start at the beginning. Modern humans, people biologically identical to you, have existed for roughly 300,000 years. For approximately 290,000 of those years, nobody had a job. There was no employment, no wages, no boss, no performance review, no career ladder, no alarm clock pulling you out of sleep before your body was ready. The entire architecture of modern working life, the thing that now consumes roughly 1/3 of your waking existence, did not exist, and the humans living without it were not suffering. The evidence suggests they were doing something closer to flourishing. In 1963, an anthropologist named Richard Lee made a discovery that quietly upended everything academics thought they knew about prehistoric life. He spent months tracking the daily activities of the Ju-Hwanzi people of Botswana, one of the last remaining groups on Earth still living in a way that closely resembles pre-agricultural human life. What he found was not what anyone expected. Adults in this community spent an average of 2.5 days per week acquiring food. That is roughly 17 hours, not 40, not 50, not 60, 17. The rest of the time was entirely unstructured, unscheduled, theirs. And before you dismiss this as an anomaly, Lee's findings were not unique. The Hadza people of Tanzania, the Ashe of Paraguay, the Martu of Australia, researchers studying hunter-gatherer communities across completely different continents, completely different climates, completely different environments arrived at essentially the same conclusion every single time. Between 15 and 20 hours per week spent on survival activities, the rest available for whatever a human being actually wants to do with their time. For context, you probably hit 20 hours of work before Wednesday afternoon. Now some of you are already forming the objection. These are modern people. How do we know ancient humans lived this way? And it is a fair and important question. The answer comes from bones. When archaeologists compare the skeletal remains of ancient hunter-gatherers to the skeletons of the earliest farming populations, the difference is not subtle. It is stark, devastating even. The first farmers were shorter than the hunter-gatherers who came before them. Their spines show clear evidence of arthritis and repetitive strain damage. Their teeth were riddled with cavities caused by grain-heavy diets. Malnutrition markers appear in their bones at rates far higher than in hunter-gatherer populations. And they died younger, significantly younger. The hunter-gatherers, taller, stronger bones, better teeth, less joint damage, more years of life. Their skeletons tell a story their voices cannot. They were not grinding through existence. They were not bent under the weight of survival. They were, by every physical measure we have, doing better than the people who came after them. But the most extraordinary evidence, the evidence that stops me completely every time I think about it, is not found in bones. It is found on walls. In 1994, explorers discovered the Chauvet Cave in southern France. Inside, protected by darkness and time, were paintings created approximately 30,000 years ago. Horses rendered with perspective and movement, lions caught mid-stride, rhinoceroses drawn with shading so sophisticated that modern artists have studied them. These were not crude marks scratched by desperate people trying to survive. These were works of art, deliberate, skilled, breathtaking works of art, created by someone who had enough time, enough safety, and enough peace of mind to go deep into a cave by firelight and make something beautiful for no practical reason whatsoever. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found shell beads 100,000 years old, tiny holes drilled through seashells, clearly designed to be strung together as jewelry. The nearest coastline was 20 kilometers away. Someone walked 40 kilometers round trip just to collect shells, and then spent additional hours carefully drilling them with stone tools. Not for food, not for protection, to look good. In Germany in 2008, researchers found a flute carved from a vulture bone, 40,000 years old. 5 finger holes, perfectly and deliberately spaced. Whoever made this understood music. They understood pitch and tone and the relationship between them. and they invested significant time and skill in creating an instrument, not for hunting, not for warmth, not for any survival purpose, for music, for the pleasure of sound. These are not isolated finds. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, archaeological sites from 100,000 years ago onward are filled with evidence of people making things beautiful, decorated tools far more elaborate than their function required, pigments mixed and applied with care, patterns carved into bones and stones with no practical purpose, people making art because they had time to make art, because having time was simply the normal condition of human existence. So what did a full day actually look like? You wake up around dawn. No alarm. Your body wakes when it is ready. The fire from the night before is still smoldering, and someone adds wood without being asked. You eat. Leftover meat from yesterday, berries or nuts gathered the day before. Breakfast is slow and social. People talk. They make loose plans, not because they have schedules to keep, but because that is what humans naturally do when they are together with nowhere urgent to be. Mid-morning, a small group might leave to hunt or gather. But here's the crucial thing. You do not go every day. If food from 2 days ago is still available, you might not leave camp at all. You might spend the morning working on a tool, sharpening a spear point, weaving a basket, scraping an animal hide until it becomes soft and workable. This is not work in any sense you would recognize. There is no clock, there is no supervisor, there is no performance metric. You do it because competence earns respect. Because making things well is part of being the kind of person other people want to share food with. When hunting does happen, it does not look like the frantic chase of wildlife documentaries. Humans are persistence hunters. We track animals at a steady pace for hours, sometimes the better part of a day, until they overheat and can no longer run. We are the only species on Earth capable of this, because we can sweat and regulate our body temperature while moving continuously. Most animals cannot. We simply outlast them. The hunt might take 4 to 6 hours including travel. Then the animal is brought back. Everyone eats together. And by early afternoon, the purposeful part of the day is essentially over. What happens next is what modern people find almost impossible to comprehend. Nothing and everything. People rest in the shade. They sit together and talk. Not about productivity, not about goals, not about what they should be doing instead. They just talk. They play with children. They groom each other. They make jewelry from shells and animal teeth. They carve patterns into bone. They nap without guilt. Anthropologist James Woodburn documented that among the Juhoansi, adults spent roughly 6 hours every day in what researchers called social time. Not working, not sleeping, just being with other people, talking, laughing, existing together without agenda. And this was not wasted time. In a world without contracts or police or banks, your relationships were your survival infrastructure. If people liked you, they shared food when your hunt failed. If they didn't have to. So you invested in those bonds the same way modern people invest in financial security, because your life genuinely depended on it. Then the sun set. And this is where something remarkable happened. In 2014, anthropologist Polly Wiesner analyzed hundreds of hours of recorded conversations from Jew/Huanzi communities. During daylight hours, conversations were practical. Who saw animal tracks where? Which plants were nearly ready for harvest? Disputes about fair sharing. But after dark, around the fire, 81% of all conversation shifted to stories. Myths about how the world began. Tales of ancestors who did impossible things. Jokes that made everyone laugh until their sides hurt. Stories of places and people far away. Wiesner argued that this is where human culture was actually born. Gods and spirits and history and meaning. Things you can only reach when your stomach is full and you feel safe and the darkness wraps around you like a blanket and there is nowhere else you need to be. And then they slept. But not the way you sleep. Before artificial light, humans slept in 2 separate phases. First sleep for roughly 4 hours. Then a natural wakeful period of 1 to 2 hours in complete darkness, used for quiet reflection, for conversation, for intimacy. Then second sleep for another 4 hours. The concept of lying down at 10 and waking at 6 as a single unbroken block is not ancient. It is a product of artificial lighting and industrial schedules. Your 2 a.m. wakefulness that you treat as insomnia, your ancestors built their night around it. So here is the full picture of a human day, the way humans lived it for 99% of our existence on this earth. 4 to 6 hours of purposeful activity, hunting, gathering, making tools. 6 hours of social connection, talking, laughing, playing, grooming, telling stories. 8 hours of sleep in 2 natural phases. And the rest, sitting, watching, existing without needing to justify your existence through output. Then, roughly 10,000 years ago, something changed, and it changed everything. Humans in the Fertile Crescent began planting seeds and domesticating animals. It looked like progress. It produced more food per unit of land. It allowed populations to grow, and that growth became a trap so complete and so permanent that we have never escaped it. Once you start farming, you can feed more people. More people means you need more food. More food means more farming. More farming means you need everyone working all the time, planting and weeding and harvesting and defending and storing. Within a few generations, populations had grown beyond any possibility of returning to the old way. There were simply too many mouths. You were locked in. The leisure that had defined human life for hundreds of thousands of years began to disappear. First slowly, then completely. And as populations expanded, specialization followed. Toolmakers, potters, soldiers, priests, tax collectors, administrators, and eventually, inevitably, the concept that would come to define modern existence, the idea that your time belongs to someone else in exchange for the resources you need to survive. A job. The skeletal record is unambiguous about what this transition cost. Early farmers worked harder than hunter-gatherers, ate worse, suffered more physical damage, died younger. They gave up health, leisure, freedom, and years of life. And in return, they got population growth and the slow accumulation of civilization. A trade that benefited the species and cost the individual everything. Today you spend 90,000 hours of your life working. Your ancestors spent a fraction of that and had everything they needed. You treat insomnia as a disorder. They built their nights around wakefulness. You feel guilty resting. They rested as a matter of course. You save your creativity for evenings and weekends if you have energy left. They made art in the middle of the day because the middle of the day was free. And that exhaustion, that persistent background, won't quite go away exhaustion that you carry with you everywhere. That is not a character flaw. That is not anxiety or laziness or a failure of discipline. That is a human animal built over 300,000 years for a life of varied movement, deep social connection, creative expression, and genuine rest. Living inside a system designed 10,000 years ago to extract maximum labor from human bodies, and that has been optimizing for that purpose ever since. Your ancestors did not work toward a life worth living. They were already living it. You are not burnt out because you are failing. You are burnt out because you were never supposed to live like this. And somewhere, underneath everything the modern world has built on top of it, your body still knows the difference.